Okay. Well, greetings to everyone at home. It is a Saturday afternoon, and we have an honor and a pleasure to be hosting an amazing lady, an amazing, powerful lady that I've ever come across. We've known each other for years, and I think I did not actually want to remember that far back because it just tells of the age as to how long we've known each other. My guest today is Motlalepule Mukine, a powerhouse of note. This is the true Mbokodo because, you know, right at the stages when we were still thinking about going up the corporate ladder, she had already made up her mind and she was already stating her purpose and living her purpose. And she had started her own coaching company. And this is about 12 years back. Together with that, I see she's done a lot of progress. She's launched a book, which we're discussing today, called Fueled by Fear. She runs entities. She's an inspirational speaker. She hosts a YouTube channel. She does a lot of work, especially around development of women. Motlalepule, welcome. And it's such an honor to have you.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Pumza. Thanks for inviting me. I'm very excited.
Motlalepule, I asked you, why the title Fueled by Fear? Why would you choose fear out of all the topics you could write about?
Thanks for that question. You know, I think is it Toni Morrison who was saying, if you're looking for a book that you cannot find, go ahead and write it. You know, I'm paraphrasing what you said. And I think I had, the fear journey for me started with the workshops that I was doing with a friend and a colleague over 18 months. And we were just facilitating sessions. They were meant for everybody, but as with these things, you know, it was majority women who showed up for workshops on fear. And I then realized that fear is a thing, you know, and in my spaces, we never used to talk about fear. It's not politically correct to own up to fear. So in these sessions, women were really coming out. I mean, I was gobsmacked at how fear had stopped people from becoming who they are meant to be. So after that experience, I started looking at my own journey around fear, and I found so much fear in my journey. I found instances where I did triumph over fear, but of course, at that time, I wasn't even thinking about it in the way that I now am thinking about it. So I thought, this is something that is worth, you know, talking about, and why not put it in a book? So I put it in a book so that we can then have these conversations around fear.
So you raise a very important point, Motlalepule, because I want to draw then a distinction that says, if you're not even aware that you have fear in you, how do you frame your life then? Knowing that, I suppose you don't know that you have fear. And how did you find that you then reframed your life after understanding and walking the journey of fear?
That is one of the critical things, you know, I would say that I then deal with when I work with people around fear, because some behaviors that people exhibit out of fear, they don't have a consciousness that they do what they do because they're fearful. I'll give you an example. A lot of women, when they have fear, you know, the way they exhibit the fear is in trying too much, you know, and we've all experienced this one person that you want to be like, you know, relax a bit, you know, you don't have to try so hard, you know, but at that time, they're really giving it their all. They are not aware that they are pushed by fear. There's also anger that comes as a result of fear. When people exhibit anger in their relationship with others, sometimes they're not aware that it's almost like they're trying to protect themselves, because fear makes us vulnerable, and we don't like to be vulnerable. So if you exhibit anger, especially as a person who is the most powerful in that engagement, then you are protected. So in terms of understanding then, how to journey with the, so when I work with somebody, whether it's a group or it's an individual, we look at all those behavior, we look at the feedback that people would have given you. We look at how, because in that space that then is safe, the question is for you to answer in terms of how do you think people are experiencing you. If you sit back and you look at yourself in the corporate space, in the leadership space, how do you think people are experiencing you? And then we play with a lot of scenarios, just to be able for you to even go home and think about it and sleep over it. And eventually, if you've come to coaching, it's because you want to change. It's because you want to help, you want to grow. So ultimately, you'll be able to identify areas where you need to then do the work.
I like how the whole discussion is developing, because it's really becoming a powerful conversation. And I think there are many elements and layers to fear. What I want to know, Matlalepula, is could there be good aspects of fear? Are there elements that are good from fear?
Yes. So I'm very specific in the work that I do around fear, that I work with fear that is debilitating, fear that blocks us from becoming who we are called to be, that blocks us from going out to achieve the things that you are capable of achieving. So that is my focus. But there is fear that is good, which is not problematic. So we're not doing anything around it, because if you live in South Africa, chances are you'd have had a brush with crime, as an example. So it's normal, to have fear around public spaces, etc. And of course, when I say normal, I'm also aware that it can be very extreme. And it's when it's extreme that, again, it paralyzes you. And then you find that maybe you're needing therapy. So there is fear that is good. There's also fear that is good in terms of, when you're studying, that fear of failing an exam, which then propels you to study. So it's good fear. Yeah. So we are not worried about that fear, but we're worried about this other fear that we shouldn't have.
And then in your interventions, what is the most common fear that you are finding, especially around female leaders? And how often do we project it? And I'm taking that question because we had a discussion before coming onto the live recording, where we spoke about instances where people are not even aware that they're fearful. And I think the most significant one for me, because I'm in the space of women development, where you find that women are complaining that they don't have access to the information. Then you give the information and people are still not taking the decision to take their lives forward. And I think in a sense, it is an element of fear as well. It's a fear of actually succeeding in what you put your attention to.
That is so true. And I love working in that space. It's a very difficult space to navigate, again, because women executives, because they're in powerful positions, they don't want to own, the fact that there is a fear. And I'm not saying everybody is fearful, but there's instances where people really need to sit and do work around the fears that they have. So one of the fears that I think is common from my experiences, if you allow me, I want to tell a little story that Mampela Rampele talks about in her first book. And in that book, she talks about the time when they were, university students as activists. In that time, for people that don't know, part of the activism when you were a student at previously white universities was that you were not participating in the extramurals. So all you did was the academics. So you wouldn't swim, you wouldn't play soccer, you wouldn't be, in organizations, etc., etc. So that was part of the struggle. And then a few years later, because obviously from time to time they review what they are doing. A few years later, they sat and they decided that actually, you know what, these very things that we don't want to participate in, all these resources and all these activities, they belong to us too. We also are inhabitants. We also are South Africans, and these have been bought with money from our parents as well. So why not go and enjoy the fruit of our parents' labor? And then they decided at that point that they are going to play, they're going to swim, they're going to do whatever it is that they wanted to do, except that not all of them agreed. So there were those who went on the new narrative, and there were those who stayed with the old one. So fast forward, times when we come into corporate. So how I see that playing out is a lot of well, maybe not, let me not say a lot, but some of the executives that I have encountered have a situation where they manage a very big budget. So there's a training budget as well. And I have coached a lot of women, and I can say a lot because in comparison and statistically, there are a lot that I have coached who refuse to use the budget from the organization. They say, no, I want to use my own money. And for a while it never bothered me, and it's a conversation I really want to have with women, to say, why can't we use that money? It's for you as well. Aren't you employed by that organization? You are sharing your expertise, you are changing things, you are contributing in that space, and there's a whole lot of people who also are enjoying benefits from that budget. But some of the women are like, no, and of course there's reasons for that. But for me, I'm interested, is there anything beyond the reasons that are being given on the surface?
Yeah.
So for me, there's possibilities of fear there, fear of embracing what is yours. So as I say, it's a conversation that at some other time, I really, really want to invest in getting deeper in understanding.
You're touching on a surface of something very deep in a way, because I think when I take this fear thing, I take it further and I look at the background that we're coming from, the societal built fear because of context that we're coming from, the backgrounds. And I ask myself that the work that we do, is it really like deep work that we're doing, or the deeper work that needs to happen on a societal level? And my question is framed because it goes back to the context of where we grew up. And I don't like to use that as an excuse, but sometimes it is better to understand the root of matters so that we better deal with them. And and actually, if you mirror it back to someone, they have a better way of understanding and relating to it. So I'm thinking there's a stage where the context of many South Africans was that you don't know if you live up to 40. You don't know if there will be, you can plan your life as far ahead as possible. You did not know that you had access to certain things. And I think a point in time is exactly what you're raising, which is sometimes linked to the imposter syndrome, that you're sitting there, but yet you don't feel like you have, the access to the resources that are available there. How deep is this thing? Because I know you've done a lot of work, but from a society's perspective, is there something deeper that we need to deal with?
Definitely, Phumza. And I don't even see us finishing that work in our time. I see that as work that will continue beyond generations, because when we understand the history of apartheid, as an example, when we understand the history of just being alienated, how deep that is within, and how long it takes for us to step outside of that. So So it's very, very deep work. And the answer in terms of whether we are engaging in that work, no, we're not. And I'll tell you why. Because deep work requires time, requires resources. Organizations are not prepared to give that time. You know, organizations, you know, there's some of them which are really, really making an effort, you know. But most of the time, this work is not only confined to workshops. This work is work that we have to be workshopping as we work, you know, every day. As we sit in meetings, as we run projects, we're supposed to be empowered enough, and organizations are supposed to create spaces that are safe for me to be in a project meeting and to be like, it's not working. You know, I'm really not experiencing being embraced in this environment. And could it be because I'm a woman, or I'm a Black person, or I'm a this, you know, I come from a community that is alienated in those kind of spaces. We don't have capacity to do that. And I must say, you know, it's a very difficult thing to balance, because organizations will argue that we are about making money. And if I give so much time in, you know, for these kind of activities, how much money am I going to be making at the end of it? So you know, I read something recently, and I just thought it was such a powerful assertion by Sylvester in his book. And he talks, and I think, you know, it's a message for me that would resonate with people who have power, people who employ people, you know. And he talks about organizations not employing one Black person, as an example. You know, you have executive teams that have traditionally been all white. And he said organizations would then be like, oh no, we need to change, we need to transform, etc., etc. And then they go and they get a Punza to come into the team. But you're like one Black person in a team of 20. There is no way that you can dent that system, you know. And I like how he puts it. He said organizations must start and do things differently. They must go and employ 5 Black executives all at once. Because the thing about being a minority, about coming from groups that have been alienated, is you need support of people who understand exactly where you at, where you come from. So can you imagine if there's 5 of you and you all new in this organization? You are able, you know, there's a better chance of you thriving. Unlike if there's just one, even when you were this person who is, you know, who is good, who is conscientious, who is awake, there's, you know, as I said, that culture is going to overwhelm you, is going to drown you. And that is why we then label our fellow Black people or women having failed. They haven't failed. You know, it's the organization that has failed them. But yeah, these are very difficult things to balance.
I like that they are difficult, Motlalepule, but we are starting to find the language that explains them. And I think what I wanted to ask is to go back to the book and say why the title Fueled by Fear. And I think at first sight, I'm not sure whether to make something positive or negative of it. Am I making decisions fueled by fear, or am I making strides in spite of my fear? Let's talk about the book and just what you touch on in the book.
So I touch on personal stories of fear. And one of the story that people like, which I tell in the conversations around fear, is the story, my swimming story. That's what I call it. And it's a literal swimming story. So I grew up, you know, having issues with my body, like a lot of Black people. Not Black people, women, yeah. And interestingly, I learned much later in life that even women that I think are slim, they also have issues with their body, you know. So it's not a slim, it's not about being slim or being overweight or being fat or whatever. Sometimes it's just a woman thing that, again, We come from that space where we've never gotten to embrace our bodies, never gotten to embrace who we are, because there's most a model out there, that is created for us. We're supposed to fit that kind of a narrative. So like a lot of women, I had issues with my body, and I love swimming, and I wouldn't swim. I was at Vets, big swimming pool, and every day I looked at people swim, and I'll just look, and especially because the swimming pool at Vets is like in the middle. I mean, everybody walks past the pool all the time, and I was so conscious of all these people. What were they going to say seeing me swim? And fast forward, the day that I decided what will happen actually if I swim, and I thought today is today. And I went and I swam. And there's a whole lot of psychological shift that took place from the moment I decided to the moment I got into the water, and I think that whole engagement is a book in itself, which maybe I'll write one day, because for me, it is that moment of confronting one's fear. It is that moment where I think it's Joyce Meyer. She's got a new book on fear, and it's entitled Do It Afraid. Okay. So for me, it's that moment of doing it afraid. It's that moment of showing up in all of your courage with your heart beating very fast, but still going and do it. It's that moment where, have you had a speaker, addressing people on a podium with a voice shaking? It's that moment for me. I love those moments because it says, even though this person is afraid, is feeling intimidated or whatever, but they're doing it. So for me, I look at that story and I extrapolate so much that I then use to help people do the same. And I talk about jumping into the pool as a concept, to say, so what is the pool that you need to jump into? What is that fear that you need to go ahead and do, something that you're needing to do? And as I say, that is one of the powerful, I think it's a powerful story, that I tell in the book. And then, I basically use it in the workshops, to show people that we can do it afraid. And I can promise you that one of the most powerful thing after that experience, which I also talk about when we do the conversations, is something that I didn't know, that when you face your fear, you don't only free yourself. There's a lot of people around you that you set free. I mean, that makes me so emotional every time I think about. You have no idea the amount of women that came to me after that experience, and they were like, you are brave. They were like, I never thought I could swim. What time are you swimming tomorrow? I'm coming to swim with you. So suddenly I was like a mentor, a holder of people that wanted to swim but didn't have the courage. So imagine if we do that in every area of our lives. If as a corporate woman, if as a leader in an organization, you hold all those people who've been afraid to do what you are doing.
That is so powerful, and it so much covers everything about today's talk, actually, because that is the essence of everything else. The understanding that people are naturally courageous is false, because many people do take a chance, and you take a chance knowing you might fail, that you could go onto that stage and fail dismally, and everything can go wrong, but you do it anyway. And I love what you're saying. It goes with the saying that says, when you shine, you unconsciously allow others to shine because you stood and they've seen you tell your story. Now, you touch on a very good essence of fear, and I love this topic because I always feel like I've been one of those people who, for me, it didn't matter what people say. It was about what I proved to myself. And I just put myself onto that stage and I just, give the talk and you can get the feedback later. It's okay, you can take that. And sometimes I do want to communicate that to women to say, you know what? The fear is as good as just that first step. But once you get there, you overcome that. And I think, as you mentioned it was the first steps, which can be such a pain and they can be so long. Once you put your foot onto that swimming pool, it was no longer the fear, but it was about me doing what I like to do. So it's a rich discussion, Motlalepula, and it's a powerful one that I would want us to unpack a couple of times, because I do believe that it's such a big thing for women. We meet women who are so gifted, but they'll tell you, no, I cannot stand in front of people. But I'm saying, how will people recognize the gift that you have if you cannot share it openly in platforms? So what I want to find out, what are the strategies that one can use to take that first leap of faith? And I like how you're explaining it, because when you give a descriptive perspective of saying it was a book on its own to move from the first step onto the swimming pool. It really is the truth, because that is the anatomy of fear. It can be so debilitating, and it can give you physical features as well. Almost show you it's a life and death matter. You're gonna die, you're gonna die, you're gonna die. It's almost like, it's almost like that kind of a feeling. What are the strategies you've learned to actually overcome that?
So there's quite a number of strategies, but of course, we'll look at a few. So one of the big ones for me is working with your inner critic. And I know as women, majority of us, we have a very active inner critic. You're standing there and you're thinking, ooh, I'm not good enough, I'm not this, I'm not educated enough, my hair is not good enough, my this is not good enough, etc. And it's not only about things external, but it's also about internal, about our sense of self-worth. I just finished working with a client, very senior person who keeps doubting themselves. And you know why? Because they feel they're not as educated as their peers. She's quite educated, but she's in a team with people who've got a lot of postgraduate qualifications. And she doesn't have as much postgraduate qualifications like the other people. So can you see that then you get to that space where the other people become your benchmark, and I know it's good, but it's also not good. So as I say, one of the strategies is to look at the inner critic. What are the things that you say to yourself about yourself? Number one, what are the voices in your head? Because some of those voices are the voices of the teacher, the parent, that manager who never saw anything good that you did, and how are you responding to those voices? So it then becomes important, as part of you dealing with the fear, to take a proactive step against those voices, to say, if the voice says this, what is my response? Because when we are in a state of unresourcefulness, we agree with the voice, we let it beat us down. But when we rise up in our power, then we speak back. Whatever the voice say, I've got a response, and I'm like, you think I'm not good enough? Just watch me. And I go and I do my thing. So for me, it's the inner critic. And for other people, there's a lot of work to do around the inner critic, because if you've had those voices come from your parents and from like your teachers when you were young, you find that there's so much embedded in the system already, and you've believed that for years. So there's a lot of work. You might need to go on therapy, to be able to rid yourself of all those, the belief that you have embraced from, whatever it is that was said. Another thing is clarity, and most people don't invest in clarity. I like, I think it's Robin Sharma. I like how he talks about clarity. And he says you can never be a master of your craft if you don't have clarity, you know. So for me, is exactly that. In the same way, when you scope your project, when you look at, you know, things that you need to do, etc. Even when we do that for our own careers, our own goals, we also need to look at things that potentially could sabotage us. And fear is one of those things. And the question at that point is, so what are you going to do about it? You know, so I always talk about creating an imaginary place of courage for yourself. And how you do that is so that when you sit in that meeting where you're starting to feel fearful, you can just go into that imaginary place in your mind of courage. And then you'll be able to show up in all of your courageous self, you know. But as I say, you know, these are now things that either, you know, whether we are in a group or we're working one-on-one, we can dwell deeply in terms of how exactly do you do that. But there's a lot of strategies just in terms of, you know, getting yourself out of that. And I like what you said earlier about fear making us sick, because there's also psychosomatic impact of fear. When people get sick and they go to the doctor, and the doctor diagnoses them and they give them treatment, but in essence, these people are just dealing with fear and they don't know it. You know? So there's a lot of work around the subject of fear. But the beauty is it's doable. We can triumph over fear. And what I say normally is I used to think the strategy is to not be fearful, to work against. But I'm finding that against, you exerting energy on, you know, on a negative. But for me, I'm like, I like that thing of, you know, do it afraid. So there's a grace around just to with fear beating inside of you. And then eventually everything flows, you know, everything flows together. And then whether you're still afraid or not, but it's not stopping you from doing what you need to do.
Wow. I loved the part you raised about the senior woman when she's comparing herself to the peers. And I'm starting to wonder that how does that fear show up when you are a people leader and you are responsible for the development of people? Yet when you are showing up, you are showing from a position of fear. How does it then affect? Because I suppose the opposite is true, where we said when you allow your light to come through, where you've taken those bold decisions and allowed others to take the bold decision, what is the inverse then of when someone is appearing from a place of fear?
That is devastating to be led by somebody like that. Because when we are led by strong leaders, you know, their light enables us to shine as well. And the opposite happens when we are led by people who are fearful, people who are not confident, etc., that they really don't create an environment for us to shine. So somebody like that, you know, the manifestations of that kind of leadership are varied. You know, what I've seen is people who then don't become open to ideas from other people. I've seen people who then become very top down. You know, there's normally a joke, and it's really is not a joke, but people who say, you know, I give you suggestions on how to do stuff, on how to show up, etc., etc. And then when you don't take my suggestions, then I become upset. You know, and people forgetting that a suggestion is a suggestion. It means it can be embraced and it can be discarded. So when you're having issues around fear, around, you know, being that kind of a leader, you're thinking everything that you say, you know, people must embrace. In fact, my son, when he was younger, he said something that shook me at the time, but I got to appreciate it much later. And he said to me, he said, you are not the only custodian of wisdom and knowledge where I'm concerned. I was like, no, because at that stage, I think I was trying to say, no, you must check with me, you must ask me, you must this me, And he was like, no, but I learn from other sources as well. I learn from other people. And at that stage, I struggled with him having to learn from other people. I wanted to be the only person, but it was a lesson for me that life is like that. We all learn from different sources. So if you insist that you are the only fountain of wisdom, I mean, it's not going to empower the people that you're leading, not at all.
That is a powerful statement, and the wisdom that comes out of these children, hey? And you can't, no, we can't even be the mothers and give them the look anymore. They know we can't do.
No. There's Uncle Google for everything.
I know. You know what? I'm really enjoying the essence of today, and I feel like it really needs to be unpacked into even longer discussions, Makalepula, because fear is a real symptom that is hindering the progress of women in progressing, and we show it in different disguises, in different guises. Where we sometimes, and I think we had this discussion, where sometimes it's shown as aggression, it's shown as different things because people are denying the fact that they are fearful. You know what I'm saying? And it's a deeper thing because that then also sort of delays then the healing part of the whole process. So I do want us to unpack it. What I want to know though now is if people are trying to reach you, how do they reach you? Because they want to do deeper work on fear.
So I'm available. I'm on social media, and on Facebook, I'm Motlalepule Mukine. On Twitter, I'm Motlalepule M. On LinkedIn, I'm Motlalepule Mukine. And I also have a business page, a Temogo coaching page on Facebook where they can reach me as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then the book, there was a lot of interest on the book. Where do they find it?
So I sell the book myself. It's not in the bookstores. So people can contact me through any of the social media platforms, and then we'll be able to post it to get it delivered to where they are. Yeah, that's how the book
Awesome. I've really enjoyed this, Mutlalepula, and I think we never get to a point of not being fearful because we are people after all. However, I liked what you said when you said there are aspects of it that are no longer serving you, where it is debilitating, you can move forward, and some work is required. And I always find discouragement when people don't think that there's work that needs to happen. With anyone, we all have our scars. And this is one element that people do not want to work on. I would like to really thank you. And I want to assure you that there'll be a lot of other sessions. And I think there's a space for us to also have a master class on just fear.
Sure. I'm open to, as I say, because I've identified this as something that I also need to continuously work on, but I know a whole lot of sisters out there and brothers also need to do work on fear. So let's do this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And you must have a brilliant afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks for inviting me. All the best.
Thanks, Mr.